Swimming has great spiritual meaning for me. It wasn't always that way. When I was an 8-year-old kid, I joined the countless youth attending swim lessons at the public pool. Problem for me was I couldn't get the hang of swimming. My worst nightmare came true during the parent day when we were supposed to show off our new skills. When Coach yelled, "Go!" I was at the back of the pack because I wasn't a very fast swimmer. And consequently, I inhaled some water as me and 30 other kids churned up the shallow end in an attempt to be the first one to the other side. I only lasted for about 2 feet, then had to stand and clear my lungs. It scared me pretty good, and I officially became afraid of drowning at that moment. But the emotional dunking I suffered was embarrassment. I didn't attempt swimming again until I met my future husband in college. He loved scuba diving, so I knew that any future we had together would probably include water, like lakes and oceans. So my junior year in college, I took the plunge, so to speak, and I took swimming lessons. Off I went to my first class, and the first thing we were told to do was hold our breath and stay on the bottom of the shallow end as long as possible. Stay on the bottom. With fear and trepidation, me and my little class of scared college kids took deep breaths and sank to the bottom of the shallow end, only to find we couldn't stay there. Try as we might, we all kept bobbing to the top of the water. We'd take a deep breath and try again, and again, and again. It became a comical game, where we would even hold onto the side of the pool, forcing ourselves down. Imagine that! After about 5 minutes or so, our instructors explained that sinking was not as easy as it looked, and that our bodies were actually pretty buoyant, especially when we held our breath. It was a revelation. I discovered that water wasn't my mortal enemy. In fact, it might even be my friend. They taught us some basic strokes, and though I became confident enough to stay in the water without the fear of drowning, I still couldn't really move through the water with any speed. In fact, I'm pretty sure even at the age of 22, if I were put back in the same pool with those 8-year-old kids, I still would have been the last one on parent day. I just couldn't figure out the problem. Why couldn't I propel myself through the water like everyone else? I did learn to scuba, and the fins helped with speed, but the dilemma remained. I was a slowpoke when it came to just swimming. Fast forward 15 to 20 years. For my son's swim lessons, I picked a small class at a private pool, hoping to avoid any chance of public humiliation for them. Both my boys thrived at swimming, and when my oldest turned 8, we decided to put in our own pool. Now, having our own private pool presented the opportunity for me to figure out why I couldn't swim like others, and so I was determined to solve my own mystery. I did a few self-education things, like checking out a beginner swimming video from the library and looking up some swimming instructions online. I also began to experiment and practice in the water. Now, this is not an overnight success story, but as the years passed by, my swimming skills did improve, and along the way, I made some discoveries about myself. First, I discovered my fear of drowning in my childhood haunted me well into my adulthood. It was an underlying tension I couldn't put my finger on or fix. Until I could relax completely in the water, my fear kept me tense, and that muscle tension kept me handicapped in speed. In a related way, I discovered I didn't really grasp the technique I was taught in my college swimming class, even though the technique they taught was a very natural body movement in water. My underlying fear of drowning and subsequent muscle tension kept me from letting my body respond naturally to the water. But as I practiced the strokes I learned from the video, I began to relax, and my swimming technique became second nature. And finally, I discovered that the embarrassment I suffered when I was 8 wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout my life, in almost all circumstances, instead of focusing on self-improvement, I was distracted by wondering what others thought of me. In swimming, I compared myself to other swimmers. Instead of learning from them, I felt ashamed I wasn't as good as them. That comparison actually kept me from my goal. But focusing on only my relationship to the water began my turnaround in faster swimming. One day while I was swimming, it occurred to me that my experiences with swimming and discoveries about myself were somewhat analogous to my relationship with God. When I was young, I had heard from the pulpit we should fear God's punishment. Yet he was supposedly a loving God. He was a mystery to me, and I couldn't really relax in my relationship with him, not knowing if I was safe with him or not. And that fear lasted well into my adulthood, too. Also, in a related way, I struggled in my prayer life with God, like I struggle with technique in swimming. Fearing him made it difficult for me to talk to him. But the more I talked to him and relaxed in his presence, experiencing him buoying me up, especially through the rough waters of my life, the more natural my relationship and conversations became with him. like relaxing, so my technique in swimming became second nature. And finally, just like I compared myself to other swimmers, I also compared myself to other Christians' relationships with God and their prayer life to Him. I wished I were as close as they seemed to be, and as eloquent as they sounded. But I've learned over the years, just like in swimming, comparing myself to others kept me distracted from what was really important, only my relationship with Him. When I stopped comparing, I started relating, and I found a friend, a divine friend.